The Charlotte Hornets just gave us an incredible behind the scenes look at their offseason. And forget about the draft stuff for a minute, because the real story is what happened inside that trade war room. We actually got to hear Charlotte's front office discussing LaMelo Ball before trading him, how much they liked Allen and O'Neal for Bridges, and they even mentioned Coby White as the future of the franchise. This was something every Hornets fan needs to see. Welcome to Hornets Digest. I'm Jeff Testanero. Before we get going, Hornets Digest, subscribe now for news and updates every day, all day, about the Charlotte Hornets and all the goings on inside Charlotte this season and beyond. Also, a nice little reminder, we're over on the socials. We're over on X. We're over on TikTok at Hornets Digest. Click follow over there for more news, updates, and more regarding the Charlotte Hornets. You'll be glad you did. I promise you that. We heard them talking about potentially moving Miles Bridges. We heard how the Naz Reid deal came together. We heard the brain trust behind moving LaMelo Ball. And maybe most importantly, we learned that Charlotte didn't view these moves as the end of the rebuild. They believe these trades were giving them the ammunition to make another big move down the road. And there's one quote from inside the room that explains the entire strategy. And I quote, "We're trying to be a great team. Which of these packages give us the best chance to be a great team?" That's what this entire offseason was about. Not simply making a trade, not simply making, trades for nothing, not dumping contracts. Charlotte was looking at the entire roster and asking, how do we turn this thing into a winner? The biggest revelation comes when we hear this. We have a team that's meeting our price on LaMelo Ball. That's when you realize just how serious these conversations had become. This wasn't Charlotte casually listening to offers. They had established a price, and someone had met it. Now the Hornets had a decision to make. Inside the room, they were asking, when are we calling teams? What's our line? Find out one last time the most we're giving up so that we're not doing it on the clock. That's preparation. They didn't want to get caught reacting emotionally when the pressure was on. They wanted to know exactly what they were willing to do before that moment arrived. And throughout these conversations, the same question kept coming up. We're trying to be a great team. Which of these packages give us the best chance? That's the fascinating part. Charlotte apparently wasn't evaluating the LaMelo Ball trade in isolation. They were looking at what trading him would allow them to do next. And when we hear this, we have a deal that we need to finalize before we can properly evaluate this one. Which was immediately followed by, if we trade LaMelo, we're probably trading Miles. That's huge. Because now we know these weren't separate offseason decisions. If LaMelo goes, does keeping Miles Bridges still make sense? If both go, what does the roster look like? What assets come back? And what can Charlotte eventually turn those assets into? Another thing that stood out was how cautious this front office seemed about making a move just for the sake of making one. At one point we hear, sometimes, not doing anything is better than doing a bad deal. And that's an important philosophy when you have the amount of flexibility Charlotte has accumulated. Because having draft picks doesn't mean you have to trade them. Having young players doesn't mean you have to package them. The Hornets seem determined to wait until they believe they're getting real value. Even inside the room, there was a disagreement. But we're saying no. The response? I'm not saying no. Then another response? I would rather go increase the quality and protect our quantity. That's exactly the balancing act Charlotte is facing. They want better players, but they don't want to empty the cupboard to get them. Then the deal happens. LaMelo Ball for Josh Green are moving to Minnesota. And Naz Reid comes back to Charlotte along with a massive package and future draft assets. And afterward, Jeff Peterson explains his decision. First, he makes it very clear this wasn't personal. I appreciate everything LaMelo has done for the organization from the bottom of my heart. And I'm not going to say anything negative about him. I do love him. He's a great kid. But then Peterson explains the philosophy behind making such a massive change. The goal is never to make the play-in or make it to the playoffs for a year, right? And then the goal is to get there and have sustainable success. And that's the entire bet Charlotte just made. They could have continued to build around LaMelo. Instead, Peterson decided that Naz Reid and all of those future assets gave Charlotte a better path. A better path toward eventually building something sustainable. And he knows that isn't necessarily going to be popular. It may not feel good in the moment for the fans and things like that. But Peterson says, I do have a vision. We have a plan to continue to, again, bring winning basketball, consistently winning basketball back to Charlotte. That's a GM putting his name directly on this decision. Peterson even says, at the end of the day, it was my call to make. So if this works, Peterson gets all the credit. He doesn't, he owns that too. And almost immediately, the conversation turns over to Miles Bridges. Phoenix is a team that has liked Miles for quite some time, and we know he's available, and we know they like Miles. Then we actually hear the framework Charlotte was discussing. If you guys are willing to have some level of conversation around your 33 first and Miles as like a starting point of the framework, we all can kind of figure out the rest of the details. I think that would be something we would discuss. They specifically mentioned Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal. If there's a world where we could do Grayson Royce for Miles and get a first, again, Charlotte is hunting for assets. But there's a reason for that. Picks are ammunition. This may be the most important part of the entire trade discussion because Peterson explains what Charlotte could eventually do with all this draft capital. Talking about the unprotected 2033 first round pick, Peterson says they wanted to kind of have it in our back pocket to whenever the time comes to maybe package some assets and go get a player that can help make a difference on this team. There it is. That's the next phase. Charlotte isn't necessarily collecting picks because they want to use every single one of them. They're creating a stockpile. They're creating ammunition because eventually another star or at least another major difference maker is going to become available. And when that happens, Charlotte wants to have enough ammunition to get involved. That's why that original war room question matters so much. Which of these packages gives us the best chance to be a great team? They're thinking beyond the season. And Coby White becomes even more important. There's one other domino created by trading LaMelo, Coby White. Charlotte says they wanted to keep Coby regardless, but once the possibility of trading LaMelo became real, retaining White became even more important. Knowing that there was a world where we did end up trading LaMelo, I think having Coby, we wanted to bring Coby back regardless, but really that continued to put the emphasis on it. And then comes a pretty definitive statement. This is big. Coby is a Hornet. Read that again for a minute. Coby is a Hornet. They tell him the person you are, the player, the development you've done, the growth you've shown. Like, we value you. And maybe the most telling quote, besides the first one, we want more Coby Whites in our program. I don't disagree with that. Coby White's great. Having him is great. Everything's going to be great. Coby himself said, they told me from the jump they wanted me to be a Hornet for a long time. So this wasn't just Charlotte subtracting LaMelo. They were deciding which player they wanted to become part of the next version of this franchise. That's what I came away with from this documentary. Good watch. Definitely gonna watch more. But that's what I took away. You don't have to agree with trading LaMelo Ball. You don't have to agree with trading Bridges. But after hearing these conversations, it's difficult to argue that Charlotte doesn't have a strategy. It's a good watch. We are over on the socials, X and TikTok, at Hornets Digest. Click follow on all of those for more Hornets news and updates. If anything else comes down, what a great watch. If anything else comes down, I'll be the first to jump on here and let you know. Until then, for Hornets Digest, I'm Jeff Testanero.